Right, the title of this video is Factoring by Grouping. At the end of this lesson, you'll be able to factor quadratic polynomials using the grouping method. All right, so we're going to jump right into factoring the polynomial using grouping, so that's the directions for these examples. You will notice that for both, if you look at both examples, they have 4 parts. What we're going to be doing is breaking these polynomials up into parts and factor using the GCF. So what we are going to do, I'm going to take the first 2 and put them together, and then I'm going to take the second 2 and put them together, and I'm going to keep them separated with this plus sign. Okay, so I'm going to take the first 2 and I'm going to factor using the GCF. I notice if I look at it, the only number, I'm going to put invisible 1 here, the only number that would go into 1 and 4 is 1, so we're just going to keep a 1. I'm not going to put a 1 out in front, we're just, because we don't have to write that. But then I notice they do both have an x. I have an x to the second and an x to the first, and the smaller of the 2 is just x to the first or just x. So I'm going to put x, put a parenthesis, just like we're used to, put an x underneath each part. So here, again, I could bring down the 1, but I don't have to. X squared divided by x, we're going to subtract the exponents, we'll get x to the first, or just x. And then there's that plus sign I'm going to break down. The x's zap each other out, and so I'm left with 4. Okay, so this first problem, that is how we factor using the GCF. I'm going to do the same thing with the second 2 problems. What number goes into both of those? It will be 2. And then they don't both have an x, so I cannot factor out an x, so I'm just going to put 2, start my parentheses. Put 2 underneath each part, just like we did in the last lesson. 2 divided by 2 is just 1x. Bring down my plus sign, and then 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay, so I've already done 2 GCF problems, but now I notice both of these terms have an x plus 4. So now I'm going to factor out the x plus 4 and start parentheses. So this is just like the very end of the last lesson. So I'm going to write x plus 4 underneath each part on this one. Okay, the x plus 4 zap each other out. I'm left with x. Bring down that plus sign. And then the x plus 4 zap each other out. I'm left with the 2. So this will be my final answer when I factor by grouping. Right, if I look at problem number 2, once again, I'm going to put the first 2 together and the second 2 together. We're grouping here. I'm going to do GCF for the first one. I'm going to bring down this plus sign in the middle of my 2 answers. Okay, I would look at what number goes into 3 and 6. That would be 3. They both have an x. Which one is the smaller? It's going to be x. So start my parentheses. Divide 3x to both of them. All right, 3 divided by 3 is just 1. X squared divided by x is x. Bring down that plus sign. The x's zap each other out. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So that problem is done. Now I'm going to go to the second problem. What number goes into 4 and 8? That would be 4. 2 goes in, but 4 is bigger. Start my parentheses because they both don't have an x. 4 divided by 4 is 1x. Bring down that plus sign. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Okay, now once again you notice, now we're to a spot where both of my terms have an x plus 2. So x plus 2 is going to be my new GCF. I'm going to start parentheses. We'll divide both terms by x plus 2. Okay, now from here, the x plus 2 zap each other out, so I'm left with a 3x. Bring down that plus sign, and then these x plus 2 zap each other out, and I'm left with 4. So that would be my finally factored answer using grouping. Okay, if I look at problem number 3, we have 9x squared plus 6x plus 12x plus 8. I'm going to do one more, and then you're going to get to do one for me here. Okay, I'm going to circle the first 2, circle the second 2, right? On this one, I would like to see what goes into both 9 and 6. That would be 3. They both have an x squared and x. The smaller one is x, so that's where we're going to start. I should have started first putting that plus sign in between, so I don't forget. They both have an, oops, I did that. Now I'm ready to divide by 3x. Sorry, I got myself off track. 9x squared divided by 3x is going to be 3x. Bring down that plus sign. The x's zap each other out. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So that part is done. Boom. Okay, my next part, what goes into 8 and 12? That's going to be 4. 2 goes in, but 4 goes in and it's bigger. And they both don't have an x, so we'll just factor out a 4. So divide both parts by 4. 12x divided by 4 is 3x. Bring down that plus sign in the middle. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And would you look at that, both terms now have a 3x plus 2. So we get to factor out the 3x plus 2. And let's just divide each term by that. Start my parentheses. 3x plus 2 zap each other out. I'm left with 3x. Bring down that plus. 3x plus 2 zap each other out. I'm left with a 4. So this is what my factored answer would look like. Right, if you look at problem number 4, I'm going to have you pause the video, try it on your own, come back and see how you did. All right, hopefully you're back and you did well. We are going to circle the first two terms, and we're going to circle the second two terms. And then from here, we are going to look at, let me bring down that plus sign first of all so I don't forget. What number goes into 5 and 10? That would be 5. They both have an x. The smaller of the two is x. So now we're going to divide out of 5x. Start my parentheses here. 5x squared divided by x is going to be x, or just 1x, plus 10, the x's zap each other. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So that part is done. And then my next part, what number goes into both of them? That would be 2. No x's in common. So divide both parts by 2. 2x divided by 2 is 1x, plus 4 divided by 2 is 2. And once again, you'll notice that they share something in parentheses in common. They both share the x plus 2. So that's going to come out front. We're going to start those parentheses. That gets written underneath each part. The x plus 2 zap each other out. I'm left with the 5x. Bring down that plus sign. The x plus 2 zap each other out, and I'm left with the 2. So that is what my factored answer should look like. Okay, if you look at problem 5, just a couple more to go here. On this problem, we are going to have same thing. We've got two parts, so we are going to go ahead and circle each of the two parts. Okay, so for this first one, notice no number other than 1 will go into 2 and 3, so I'm not going to put a number out front. And I do notice they both have an x, and the smaller one is x. Whoops, and I'm going to just save a step just a second. Okay, start my parentheses. Divide by x. So this one, 2x squared divided by x is 2x minus, the x's zap each other, it's minus 3. Okay, and this next one you'll notice, when I circled these two terms, this one starts with a negative. So if you remember when we were doing GCF factoring, we're going to use that when we do the GCF. So what number goes into 4 and 6? It's 2, but we're actually going to factor out a negative 2. So I'm going to start my parentheses. So divide by negative 2, divided by negative 2. And then we're going to divide. Negative 4 divided by negative 2 is going to be 2x. And then 6 divided by negative 2 is going to be negative 3. And nicely, this will always happen when you're doing grouping, we've got, they both have a 2x minus 3. So we get to factor out the 2x minus 3, start my parentheses, divide that from each part, and then we are going to zap out the 2x minus 3s. We've got an x left. Zap out the 2x minus 3s. We've got a minus 2 left, and we are done. Right? I think I'm working, yep. I'm going to work 6 with you, and then you get to work number 7. All right, on this one, again, circle my first 2, circle my last 2, and then here I notice that I can factor out a 3x because 3 goes into both of them, and the smallest one is x. Start my parentheses. 3x squared divided by 3 is just going to be x squared, plus 3 divided by 3 is 1x. Okay, this one, again, I notice this next one starts with a negative, so we're going to be factoring out a negative 10. They both don't have an x, so I'm not worried about that. Whoop, did I do something wrong there? Oh, I forgot to do the x, didn't I? Sorry about that, guys. So this will be x plus 1. Sorry about that. Okay, so we divided out a negative 10. Hopefully you caught that before I did. Negative 10x divided by negative 10 is just going to be x, and then negative 10 divided by negative 10 is a positive 1. So once again, notice they both are sharing, both terms share an x plus 1. So x plus 1 gets factored out. Start my parentheses. I'm going to write that under each part. X plus 1 zap, I'm left with 3x. X plus 1 zaps, I'm left with minus 10. So that would be my answer on that one. Okay, we've got one more to go, and you get to do it. So please pause the video, try it, come back and see how you did. Alrighty, I'm going to circle the first 2. I'm going to circle the second 2. Same thing, GCF. Here we go. I notice that 3 will go into both of them. They both have an x. Remember my x this time. 3x squared divided by 3x is 1x minus 6. The x is zap. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Okay, the next part starts with a negative. So when I do my GCF, it's going to be a negative 4. They both don't have an x, so I'm done with that part. So I factor out a negative 4. Here, negative 4x divided by negative 4 is 1x, and then 8 divided by negative 4 is negative 2. And very nicely, once again, the x minus 2 is shared by both terms, so we're going to factor out the x minus 2. I like to write it under each part. You might be past that step right now. That's great if you are. The x minus 2 zap each other out, so I'm left with 3x. The x minus 2 zap each other out, I'm left with minus 4. So this is going to be my factored polynomial. So hopefully now you can factor quadratic polynomials using grouping.